upgraded in any way.
Odyssey was holding her right shoulder.
The Indiana Fever finally secured the kind of playoff win their fans had been dreaming about for years. But in classic WNBA fashion, what should have been a night filled with nothing but celebration quickly turned into another controversy. Instead of the spotlight being on Lexie Hull's clutch, game-winning steal, or on the heroics of Kelsey Mitchell and Aliyah Boston, the headlines became dominated by something far more bizarre, a confrontation between Sophie Cunningham and a league-hired security guard. Sophie, who was wearing a bulky leg brace and was clearly nowhere close to being game-ready, wasn't storming the floor, wasn't causing any sort of disruption, and certainly wasn't a threat. Yet a security guard decided to play the role of an enforcer, barking orders at Sophie as if she had just rushed into a bench-clearing brawl. In this video, we're going to break down exactly what happened, unpack Sophie's reaction, and reveal the one thing she said afterward that has fans buzzing. But before we dive in, do you think Sophie is being unfairly singled out? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Now here's where things get even stranger. Sophie, standing calmly with her teammates, didn't so much as move toward confrontation. But the guard leaned in as though Sophie had broken some unspoken rule. Fans watching couldn't believe what they were seeing. One even joked, "Oh, Sophie's like that? Yeah, Chloe, she's like that. She doesn't budge. She stands her ground." Then came the kicker, Sophie throwing up her hands in that classic, "let me talk to your manager" gesture. The moment was both tense and ironic at the same time, because here was Sophie, injured and restrained by a brace, standing her ground with nothing more than body language. And let's set the record straight, when one of your teammates goes down with an injury, whether you're healthy or sidelined, you have every right to step onto the court to check on them. That's what Chloe and Sophie were doing, nothing more, nothing less. Which brings us to the real question that everyone is now asking, was this an honest but clueless overreaction by one overeager rent-a-cop? Or was it another example of the troubling pattern we've already seen in the WNBA, where certain players, especially those who don't fit the league's preferred image, end up being targeted and treated differently? When you look back at the history, it's hard not to think that Sophie was singled out deliberately. And her response, calm, measured, but firm, made it clear she wasn't about to be intimidated by a glorified hall monitor. The frustrating part is that the setting should have been nothing but celebratory. The Indiana Fever, even without Caitlin Clark and with half their roster missing, Ari McDonald, Sydney Colson, Chloe Bibby, Dewana Bonner, Damiris Dantas, and Sophie herself, still managed to pull off a dramatic and hard-fought playoff win. Fans were on their feet. The team was pumped up. The atmosphere was charged with postseason energy. Yet in the middle of all that, we got the surreal image of Sophie Cunningham, wearing her brace, standing quietly at mid-court, only to be aggressively confronted by league security. There was no fight, no foul, no reason for it. And yet, there she was, being treated like some kind of danger. That's why fans were asking, why on earth is that security guard all over Sophie Cunningham? And honestly, the more you look at it, the more obvious it seems, there was no justification for it. There was no reason for the guard to puff his chest out at Sophie, no reason to escalate a harmless situation. To Sophie's credit, she stood tall and didn't back down for a second. Think about the optics, Sophie Cunningham, visibly injured and unable to sprint if she wanted to, being leaned on by a security guard determined to escalate what should have been absolutely nothing. Cameras caught it perfectly, Sophie's face shifting from confusion, to irritation, to the classic Cunningham glare that fans know so well. It was the expression of someone saying, "Really? This is what you're doing right now?" And honestly, she had every right to give that look. The moment spread across social media instantly. Within minutes, clips of Sophie's stare-down were everywhere, and the reaction was unanimous outrage. Fans weren't angry because Sophie had overreacted. They were angry because the entire confrontation was so unnecessary. What people saw wasn't enforcement, it was harassment. And it played directly into the frustrating narrative that has followed Sophie throughout her career. She's always been painted as the villain. Here's what really happened. Odyssey Sims went down hard, and Sophie, Caitlin Clark, and Chloe Bibby stood near half-court, waiting to check on their teammate. A security guard then approached Sophie and tried to force her to move. But Sophie, unshaken, stood her ground, clapping her hands and refusing to budge. Cameras even caught her cheering and waiting for Odyssey as officials reviewed the play. That's the Fever culture, standing together, standing firm. So why did Sophie become the target here? Simple, because she doesn't toe the WNBA's party line. She's outspoken. She pushes back on narratives. She carries herself with unapologetic confidence and refuses to shrink into the background. And because of that, rival fans, certain media outlets, and now, apparently, the league's own staff treat her differently. This is the same Sophie Cunningham who regularly trends on Twitter, whose clips rack up millions of views, and whose fan base is among the loudest in all of women's basketball. She's good for business. But instead of embracing that, the league seems determined to cast her as a problem. Social media lit up with comments. Some fans outright said, Sophie gets treated like this because she doesn't fit the league's image. Others pointed out the racial and cultural double standards at play. They argued that if Angel Reese or Paige Buchers had been in Sophie's exact position, the narrative would have been entirely different. People would have praised their passion, their leadership, their intensity. But because it was Sophie Cunningham, in a leg brace no less, suddenly she was framed as a problem. Fans weren't buying it, and they made sure the league knew it. Hashtags like #FreeSophie and #WNBAExposed were trending within hours. And let me tell you, the outrage was real. Fans were posting breakdowns, calling it a meltdown from the league, and dragging the WNBA for yet another embarrassing misstep. And this wasn't an isolated situation. Sophie Cunningham didn't even escalate the incident. She stood her ground, didn't back down, but also didn't lose her composure. She handled herself with more professionalism than the very security guard who provoked the mess. And that's exactly why the clip went viral, because the drama wasn't created by Sophie. It was created by the league itself. And this isn't the first time something like this has happened. Remember when referees said they felt uncomfortable with Dejonae Carrington, and suddenly security had to intervene? The league rushed to defend Carrington. The Players Association backed her up. Media framed it as unfair treatment. So why the silence when the same thing happened to Sophie? Why is it only the fans calling out the hypocrisy while the league's leadership stays quiet? This goes beyond one overzealous cop. It highlights the WNBA's ongoing struggle with players who don't fit their curated mold. Caitlin Clark has been experiencing this since her rookie season, getting hacked, shoved, and taunted while referees swallow their whistles and the league ignores it. Sophie has been painted as the villain year after year, regardless of what she actually does. And when you put those two storylines side by side, you see the bigger picture. The WNBA doesn't know how to handle players who don't fit their narrative. Instead of celebrating them, they marginalize them. The irony? Both Caitlin Clark and Sophie Cunningham are exactly the kind of stars the league should be building around. They're marketable, they're popular, and they drive engagement like nobody else. But instead of protecting them, the WNBA allows its officials and staff to mistreat them, and fans are fed up. The fallout was immediate. Within hours, fans filled comment sections across YouTube, Twitter, and Instagram, tearing into the WNBA for embarrassing Sophie during what should have been a joyful moment. People reminded everyone of how the league once investigated fans for booing Angel Reese, or how flagrant fouls against Caitlin Clark were brushed off as just part of the game. They saw the same pattern here: selective enforcement, selective outrage, selective protection. And every time it happens, the league's credibility takes another hit. This isn't just bad optics, it's bad business. You can't claim to want growth, respect, and mainstream relevance while letting your biggest moments get overshadowed by viral clips of your players being harassed by your own staff. The truth is simple: fans don't want this. They don't want their favorite stars silenced or disrespected. They don't want to see the league playing favorites. What they want is basketball played hard, celebrated properly, and respected for what it is. And that's why the backlash hit so hard. Meanwhile, Sophie Cunningham herself handled it all better than anyone. She didn't explode, didn't lash out, didn't give the league the spectacle it seemed to be pushing her into. She stood firm, glared, and let her silence speak louder than any argument could. Fans noticed, and they poured into her social media, flooding her with support. In that moment, Sophie went from being targeted to being celebrated as the hero of the night. And when she finally did speak, she brushed the whole thing off with humor. She joked that the league was mad Indiana had won because they weren't supposed to even be there. She admitted she was sweating from nerves, pacing around, so anxious she felt like she'd played the game herself. It was classic Cunningham, sharp, funny, and unapologetically real. Instead of being diminished, she came out stronger, once again proving that every time the league tries to sideline her, her popularity only grows. And that's the real takeaway. The Fever's playoff run should have been remembered for Lexie Hull's defensive brilliance, for Boston's steady dominance, for Mitchell's leadership, and for a short-handed team's resilience. But instead, it got hijacked by an unnecessary confrontation. The league had a chance to showcase basketball, but instead, fans were left talking about a mall cop moment. And that's not growth, that's malpractice. At the center of it all is Sophie Cunningham, a player who has never conformed, never softened her edges, and never played the role the league wants her to. And ironically, that very defiance is why fans love her. The league may try to push her to the margins, but every time they do, her star power only gets brighter. Sophie wasn't wrong here, she was wronged. And the league once again looks ridiculous. So what do you think? Is Sophie Cunningham being singled out? Drop your thoughts down below, hit like, subscribe, and turn on all notifications so you never miss an update. Click on the video on your screen now, and we'll catch you in the next one.